Grace slipped on the wet stones and fell into the stream with a loud splash. The water swallowed her, pulling her deeper as she struggled to breathe. Her arms flailed, but the current was too strong. She went under again, bubbles rising where she disappeared. Samuel, fishing a few steps away, heard the cry and saw her sinking fast. Without thinking, he dropped everything and rushed in. The cold water pushed against him, but he reached her, grabbed her tightly, and fought to drag her toward the bank. Both of them coughed and gasped as they tumbled onto the grass, alive but shaking. Welcome to Afro Tales TV, your home for rich, exciting, and inspiring stories from around the world. Today's story will touch your heart and keep you hooked till the very end. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our amazing stories. Lagos was a city of endless motion. Cars honked in packed traffic jams, street vendors called out to passers-by, and the air was thick with the smell of ripe plantains frying in roadside stalls. In the heart of this bustling Nigerian metropolis lived Mr. Andrew Adams, one of the city's well-known businessmen. Mr. Adams was a tall, distinguished man who had built his wealth through years of hard work. He lived with his only daughter, Grace, in a spacious home in Acacia, a lively district of Lagos. Despite the comforts money could buy, the Adams household was often quiet, with just father and daughter moving through the large rooms and hallways. 15-year-old Grace Adams felt the silence keenly. She was grateful for the privileges her father's wealth provided: a good school, nice clothes, and a room full of books and gadgets. But she often felt lonely and confined. Her mother had passed away when Grace was very young, and since then her father had been very protective of her. He was loving but busy. Many days he left early for meetings and came home late from dinners with clients or colleagues. Grace understood he worked hard to ensure she had everything she needed, but what she truly longed for was adventure beyond the guarded walls of their home. Sometimes Grace would stand by her bedroom window on the upper floor and gaze out at the city's skyline. She could see the tops of skyscrapers in the distance and closer by, the rusted tin roofs of a nearby open-air market. She imagined what life was like for the children running between stalls or playing football in empty lots after school. Grace attended an elite private school and had a driver to take her everywhere, so she rarely walked the streets or explored on her own. Her father often warned her about dangers in the city: heavy traffic, pickpockets, or worse. She was expected to go from home to school and back under watchful eyes. Grace sighed and leaned her forehead against the cool glass. She loved Lagos, but she wanted to experience it firsthand, the real Lagos, not just the sanitized version within her safe bubble. She craved simple things: to buy roasted corn from a street seller, to dip her feet in the lagoon's edge, or to have friends beyond her schoolmates. Most of her classmates were from similarly wealthy families, and their world often felt small and insular. Grace hungered for something different, something authentic. Late one Friday afternoon, Grace's father knocked gently on her door. "Grace, are you ready?" he asked in his deep voice. Grace perked up, remembering that her father had promised to take her along on a trip the next day. He was going to visit a community on the outskirts of Lagos, where he funded a small vocational center. It wasn't often that he let her accompany him on business, but he had noticed her curiosity about the world outside their neighborhood. She opened the door with a warm smile. "Almost, Dad," she replied. On her bed lay a backpack she had packed with essentials: a water bottle, some snacks, a notebook, her phone, and a pair of sandals in case she could walk around. Grace had insisted on wearing comfortable jeans and a simple t-shirt instead of the usual dresses her father's staff laid out for outings. If she was going to see a different side of Lagos, she wanted to fit in as much as possible. Mr. Adams noticed the gleam of excitement in his daughter's eyes as he stepped into the room. It had been a while since he'd seen her this eager. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll leave early in the morning," he said. "It's a bit of a drive to the village. Make sure you get enough sleep." Grace nodded enthusiastically. As her father left the room, she quickly zipped up her backpack. Tomorrow could be the start of the adventure she had been dreaming of, even if it was just a small taste of life outside her usual routine. Not too far away from the city's reach, on the outskirts of Lagos, lay a small fishing village along a winding stream that fed into the Great Lagos Lagoon. Here, life was quieter and simpler. Roosters crowed at dawn, and the morning sun revealed narrow dirt paths where children with patched clothes kicked up dust as they ran. Wooden canoes were tied up on the banks of the stream, bobbing gently in the current. In one of the modest shacks made of wood and corrugated metal lived a boy named Samuel. Samuel was 16 years old, with curious brown eyes and skin bronzed by days spent under the sun. Every morning he rose before the sun, helping his mother draw water from the communal well and take care of his little sister, Anna. Samuel's father had passed away a few years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving Samuel's mother to provide for the family by selling vegetables and cleaning fish at the local market. Money was always tight. Samuel had finished primary school at the top of his class and dreamed of continuing his education. But after his father's death, he had set aside those dreams to help support his family. Secondary school fees were more than they could afford, so now his classroom was the world around him. That morning, Samuel grabbed his fishing line and a small net, then headed out to the stream. The early air was fresh and cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and the distant brine of the lagoon. He navigated down a narrow footpath fringed with wildflowers and tall grass, careful not to startle the goats that grazed nearby. A couple of village fishermen, older men with weathered faces, waved at him as they prepared their canoe for a day's work. Samuel waved back politely. He often fished from the bank or waded in the shallows to catch tilapia or catfish that his mother could cook or sell. It wasn't much, but every little bit helped keep his family fed. Reaching his favorite spot along the stream, Samuel set down a small bucket and inspected the water. The stream was narrow here, shaded by overhanging palms and mango trees. He placed his net strategically between some rocks downstream, then moved upstream a bit with his fishing line. Casting the line into a calm pool, he sat on a flat stone and waited. As he waited, his mind wandered. He imagined what it would be like to be in a classroom again, solving math problems or reading literature. He had loved school dearly. His teachers had called him a shining star with a bright future. Sometimes when chores were done, he would read an old textbook he kept under his bed or practice writing by copying passages onto scraps of paper. But textbooks couldn't fill empty stomachs, and so he was here, fishing. The sun climbed higher, and the morning's coolness began to give way to midday heat. Samuel wiped sweat from his brow. He had caught a few small fish and put them in his bucket, which he kept in the shade to keep the catch fresh. He decided to check on the net he'd set downstream. The water level of the stream was a bit higher than usual because it had rained heavily a couple of nights ago, and the current was stronger too. He carefully walked along the bank toward where his net was placed, his bare feet feeling the soft, damp earth. As he approached, he squinted. It looked like something was thrashing in the net underwater, possibly a fish caught in it. Samuel's heart lifted a little at the thought of a decent catch for the day. He quickened his steps, unaware that soon his path would intersect with someone from a very different world. Early the next morning, Grace found herself in the back seat of her father's SUV as it wound through Lagos's busy streets and then out onto the highway. She watched through the window as the scenery changed from concrete buildings and billboards to stretches of green land dotted with palm trees. Vendors by the roadside sold fresh fruit and coconuts, and occasionally a herd of goats would appear, lazily crossing the road, forcing the driver to slow down. Grace's nose was practically pressed against the glass. Every mile carried them further from the city's noise and into a calmer, more rural landscape she had rarely seen. After a couple of hours, they arrived at a small village nestled by a narrow stream. The village was alive with activity. Women were sweeping their front steps. A few children chased a soccer ball near some huts, and chickens pecked at the ground. Grace stepped out of the car, immediately feeling the warmth of the late morning sun and hearing the gentle babble of the nearby stream. She took a deep breath. The air smelled different here, fresher, with hints of wood smoke from cooking fires. Mr. Adams was greeted by a local community leader near a newly built small concrete building, the vocational center he had funded. A group of villagers gathered around, smiling and thanking him as he shook their hands. Grace stood by his side quietly at first, taking in the scene. The villagers seemed excited by her father's arrival. Some of the older women ululated a warm welcome. Grace gave shy smiles in return when a few curious eyes turned toward her. She felt a flush of both bashfulness and excitement. This was the first time she had been in a village like this, and she was keen to explore. After some introductions, Mr. Adams said to Grace, "I have to discuss some matters with the elders here about the center. Stay with Michael." He gestured to one of his assistants who had come along to help. "Don't wander off too far, okay? And especially keep away from the water." His tone was gentle but firm. Grace nodded, though the mention of the water piqued her interest even more. From where she stood, she could see the gleam of the stream about 100 yards away, winding behind some trees. It looked peaceful, reflecting the blue sky like a ribbon of glass. Her father disappeared into the vocational center with a group of men and women, and his assistant Michael was soon engrossed in conversation with one of the drivers by the car, likely about logistics for the ride back. Grace found herself relatively unattended. She noticed a couple of local girls about her age carrying baskets of laundry toward the stream. They were laughing and chatting in a language Grace didn't fully understand, likely Yoruba, she guessed, but their carefree manner was infectious. They walked down a narrow path towards the water. Grace bit her lip and decided to follow at a distance. If she stayed within sight of the buildings, she reasoned, it wouldn't really be disobeying. She'd still be nearby. Slipping away quietly, Grace trailed behind the local girls until the foliage grew thicker near the stream. The girls had gone further downstream where other women were gathered washing clothes, so Grace found herself alone at a bend in the stream. It was a picturesque spot. The water here was a little wider and formed a clear pool, shaded on one side by a cluster of coconut trees. Long grasses and wildflowers dotted the banks. Grace's heart danced with excitement at this small taste of freedom. She squatted by the edge of the stream and dipped her fingers in. The water was cool to touch, offering relief from the midday warmth. On impulse, Grace slipped off her sneakers and socks, rolling up her jeans to her calves. She stepped into the shallow edge, delighting in the soft squelch of mud between her toes and the gentle current swirling around her ankles. A bright blue butterfly fluttered past and Grace laughed softly, wading a little deeper to follow it as it danced over the water. The stream bed dropped unevenly, and before she knew it, the water was up to her knees. She took another step, intent on watching the butterfly, when her foot slipped on a mossy stone. With a sharp yelp, Grace lost her balance. Her arms flailed as she tried to steady herself, but it was too late. She toppled sideways into the stream. The serene pool exploded into chaos. Grace plunged into the cool water with a splash. In an instant, her head went under and murky bubbles surrounded her. She hadn't expected the stream to be so deep at this spot, but it was as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her feet. The current, mild at the shallow edges, was much stronger in the center of the stream, especially after the recent rains. It tugged at her, pulling her out further from the bank. Grace's mouth opened in a scream, but water rushed in, choking off her cry. She resurfaced for a second, sputtering and panicked, arms thrashing as she tried to grab hold of something, anything. The grassy bank was just out of reach and slippery. Her fingers scrabbled at the water's surface, and then she went under again. Grace's chest burned as she fought to hold her breath. The water was not clear here. Silt swirled around her, and she could barely see the dappled light from above. She had taken swimming lessons in the safety of a pool, but this was entirely different. The current was disorienting, the bottom uneven. In her panic, she couldn't remember any of those lessons. Her foot hit something underwater. It felt like a root or rock, and she instinctively kicked off of it, propelling herself upward. Her head broke the surface once more, and she gulped air and coughed violently, only to be pulled down again as her heavy, waterlogged clothes dragged on her. "Help! I need help!" Grace thought frantically, but her voice only came out as a choking gasp. A wave of fear surged through her. She had never felt anything like this in her life. The world above the water seemed so distant now, the cheerful chirping of birds replaced by the muffled roar of water in her ears. She was being swept slowly toward the bend in the stream, away from where she had fallen in. As darkness edged into her vision from lack of air, one thought flashed in her mind. She should have listened to her father. In that desperate moment, just when she felt her strength giving out, Grace dimly became aware of a figure splashing into the water nearby. Strong arms grabbed hold of her under her armpits. Grace coughed and gulped air as her head broke the surface once more, supported now by someone else. She couldn't see clearly. Water blurred her eyes and her own wet hair plastered her face, but she felt herself being tugged toward the shore. Her rescuer was breathing hard and struggling too, but he was steady, pushing her bit by bit out of the deep water. Grace's vision cleared enough to catch a glimpse of an older teen boy beside her, determination set on his face as he fought the current with her in tow. With one final effort, he shoved Grace forward so she could grasp the low-hanging branch of a tree at the bank. She latched onto it, and together, they pulled themselves out of the water and onto solid ground. Grace lay on the grassy bank, chest heaving as she coughed up stream water. Her whole body trembled from shock and exhaustion. Beside her, Samuel was also catching his breath, his heart pounding from the adrenaline of the rescue. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were Grace's coughing and the water dripping from their clothes back into the stream. Grace rolled onto her side, spitting out the last bit of water and sucking in air gratefully. Her vision was still a little blurry and her throat burned, but she was alive. She turned her head to look at the boy who had saved her. Samuel was drenched from head to toe. His simple t-shirt and shorts clung to his lean frame, and he was panting hard. He knelt on one knee now, one hand on the ground to steady himself. His heart was still racing. He had acted on pure instinct when he heard the splash and saw the girl flailing in the water. He himself wasn't a strong swimmer. In fact, he usually avoided the deeper parts of the stream. But in that critical moment, he hadn't thought about the risk. As he looked at Grace, relief flooded him that he had reached her in time. She was coughing, yes, but she was breathing. Samuel silently thanked God under his breath. Grace pushed herself up to a sitting position, dripping water. You saved me," she managed to say between breaths, her voice shaking. She could hardly believe that moments ago she had been certain she would drown. Now, here she was alive on solid ground, and it was because of this stranger, a boy not much older than her, who had dived in to rescue her. Her eyes were wide with gratitude and disbelief. Samuel gave a modest shrug, still trying to catch his breath. "I heard you scream," he replied quietly. "I just did what I could. Are you okay?" His voice was gentle and filled with concern. Up close, Grace could see he had a kind face and earnest eyes. She nodded. wiping water from her face and pushing her soaked hair back. Before she could speak again, frantic voices and running footsteps came from upstream. "Grace! Grace!" It was Mr. Adams, tearing through the brush with Michael and a couple of villagers close behind. Someone must have noticed the commotion or heard Grace's scream and alerted her father. When Mr. Adams saw his daughter sitting on the bank, wet and coughing but alive, he nearly collapsed in relief. He rushed to her and dropped to his knees, pulling her into a tight embrace. Grace clung to her father, bursting into tears the moment she felt his arms around her. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry," she sobbed, her voice muffled against his shoulder. She was shaking, from cold and from the fright. Mr. Adams's own eyes were wet as he held his daughter close. "Thank God you're safe," he whispered, choking back emotion. He pulled back slightly to examine her face, brushing her wet hair aside. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" Grace nodded, shivering. "I'm okay now," she said softly. "Thanks to him." She turned her gaze to Samuel, who was standing a couple of steps away, having risen to his feet when the adults arrived. Only now did Mr. Adams take in the presence of the soaked, barefoot boy standing nearby. Michael, the assistant, was already draping a towel around Grace's shoulders. He had run back to the vehicle to grab their travel towels as soon as they realized what happened. Mr. Adams stood up and approached Samuel. He noticed the boy's trembling hands and shallow breaths. Samuel was clearly exhausted from the ordeal as well. Yet there, the boy stood, eyes downcast slightly, as if unsure whether he was in trouble for something. Without a second thought, Mr. Adams reached out and gripped the boy's shoulder firmly but kindly. "Son," he said, voice filled with gratitude, "you saved my daughter's life." Samuel looked up at the tall, well-dressed man he recognized from earlier as the important guest of the village. He swallowed nervously. I just heard her and he stammered. Mr. Adams shook his head, a gesture of disbelief at what could have happened and deep thankfulness for this boy's bravery. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Samuel," the boy replied in a timid voice. "Samuel Johnson, sir." "Samuel," Mr. Adams repeated, committing it to memory. He realized that if not for Samuel's quick actions, this day could have ended in unthinkable tragedy. His voice thick with emotion, he said, "I am Andrew Adams. Grace is my daughter. I cannot begin to thank you enough for what you did. You were very brave to jump in like that." Samuel managed a small smile, feeling a mix of pride and shyness. "I'm just glad she's okay," he said earnestly. Now that the adrenaline was wearing off, he felt a slight sting on his foot where he had scraped it on a submerged rock, but it seemed minor. A crowd was beginning to gather. The two girls who had been washing clothes were now nearby, whispering to each other and looking at Grace with worry. Some elders and villagers arrived, alerted by the commotion. Grace's teeth were chattering as she sat wrapped in the towel. Michael offered another towel to Samuel, which he took gratefully, patting down his face and arms. One of the village women, seeing the state of the teens, hurried forward with a flask. "Here, let them drink this," she said in English with a thick local accent, handing it to Mr. Adams. It was a warm herbal tea used in the village for shock. Mr. Adams thanked her and passed it first to Grace, who took a few sips, feeling heat spread through her cold, aching limbs. Then he offered it to Samuel. Samuel hesitated, not used to being tended to like this, but a gentle nod from Mr. Adams convinced him. He drank a little. The tea was spicy and soothing, and it helped steady his nerves. Finally, when Grace felt a bit steadier, she reached out and touched Samuel's arm lightly. "Thank you," she said again, more firmly this time, her eyes filled with sincere gratitude. She offered him a trembling smile. Samuel dipped his head respectfully, not quite used to receiving such direct thanks, especially from someone like her. "You're welcome," he replied softly. Mr. Adams glanced from his daughter to the boy who had saved her, and he knew he could not let this act of heroism go unrewarded. This boy had risked his own life for Grace, a total stranger. Clasping a hand on Samuel's shoulder again, he said, "Samuel, I am in your debt. If there is anything I can do for you or your family, anything at all, please tell me." Samuel was taken aback by the offer. He opened his mouth, but no immediate answer came. In truth, all he had done was out of basic human compassion. He hadn't expected anything in return. He glanced over to where his bucket and fishing line lay abandoned on the bank, fish still flipping inside the bucket. What could he possibly ask for? His family lived a simple life and barely made ends meet. But to him that was just how things were. He couldn't imagine asking this important man for money or favors. Seeing the boy's hesitation and humility, Mr. Adams made a quick decision. "Are you here with anyone? Do your parents live in this village?" he inquired. Samuel nodded, finding his voice. "My mother and sister, sir. We live just over there," he said, gesturing vaguely towards a cluster of huts beyond the trees. "My father passed away," he added, lowering his eyes momentarily. Mr. Adams's face softened even more. This boy not only saved his daughter, but apparently had known hardship too. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said kindly. He then exchanged a look with Michael, a silent understanding passing between them. Turning back to Samuel, Mr. Adams spoke firmly but kindly. "I would like to meet your mother, if she's available. We'd like to properly thank her son for what he's done." Grace, now able to stand with her father's support, interjected softly, "Dad, he pulled me out when I thought I was going to die. We have to do something." Her eyes pleaded with her father to make sure Samuel knew how grateful they were. Mr. Adams squeezed her shoulder gently. "We will, Grace." He looked around at the gathered villagers and gave a nod of assurance. "We definitely will." Michael had quickly collected Grace's sneakers and her small backpack from where she left them on the bank. Carrying these items, he followed behind Mr. Adams and Grace, ready to assist if needed. With that, and after ensuring Grace could walk, the group began to make their way out of the brush. Grace insisted that she could walk on her own, and with a blanket now wrapped around her in addition to the towel, she led the way alongside her father. Samuel walked a few steps behind, still feeling a bit self-conscious, unsure of what exactly was happening next. As they moved away from the stream, the villagers parted to let them through. Some patted Samuel on the back proudly, calling him hero in Yoruba. He felt his cheeks warm at the praise. To him, what he did felt as natural as breathing. You help someone in need, but he couldn't deny a small spark of pride hearing those words. The procession moved through the village to a small cluster of huts under the shade of a giant mango tree. Samuel led Mr. Adams and Grace along a narrow footpath to one of the huts with walls of wooden planks and a roof of rusted tin. By now, word had spread about the incident at the stream and the heroic rescue.